Welcome to the Comic Binge. I'm very excited to talk about today's episode. Everyone, happy HBO Max is on. Oh, wait, I got it backwards. Batman's on HBO Max. Yeah, I totally just messed that up. I'm terrible at this. Either way, I'm excited. We got lots to talk about for comic books, as always, as we're the Comic Binge. We're still waiting on Chris, naturally. So I decided to get this party started because I want to talk comics. I want to talk to Batman. I got two very awesome people, two giant Batman fans, two other people who love comic books almost as much as me. Almost, just kidding. They probably love it equally as much as me, if not more. Today I've got Jay Oz and Garrett Watteau. Is it Garrett? Garrett? How do you say your last name?
Oh, it's not even my last name. It's become
What?
my default last name.
I love it.
Twitter. Yeah,
Okay.
it's so I had a fantasy football podcast for years, and it was called What Are the Odds? And we all our handle was just Wado. We said we called it Wado.
Got it.
And then I had, for quite a long time, I had my real last name, which I don't care. People can find it out. I'm not that sneaky. My last name's Greb, but I had it on my Twitter account, and then some weirdos got after me, and I decided I was going to make it just a little less easy to find.
Yeah.
But if you go over to bof.com, it's all over there anyway. So whatever, it's Greb.
There you go. All right. Well, there you go. Well, anyway, guys, thank you so much, everyone who's watching this. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. Chris, hopefully, will be here. I texted him. I messaged him. I'm not sure what's going on, but he'll be here probably within any minute. So either way, a couple house cleaning things before we get started. Like, subscribe. I'm trying to get better about that because, yeah, I'm terrible. So if you haven't done that already, please
smash that like button.
I hate saying that crap. It's not my bag. It's not my bag. But anyway, last week's Spider-Man Council was a big success. Thank you to everyone who watched that. Next week, I'm super, super excited. I'm not sure if either of you guys know this person. Jay, I think you might, and Garrett, you might too. But next week, we're going to be covering, much to maybe some people's chagrin, Superman Earth 1 next week. And we're going to be joined by the one and only Michael Bailey.
Oh, yeah.
So if you guys aren't familiar with Michael Bailey, he's actually one of my main inspirations for podcasting in general. And I've been listening to him since 2007, 8. It's been a long time. And he is a giant Superman fan. So he gives Chris a run for his money. So this is super, super exciting that we're going to have him next week to talk about Superman Earth 1, which I even brought. If you guys are wondering what we're reading, I even had it here. Sorry, Garrett, because Chris isn't here. Actually, you know what? I'll do this. I'm going to put myself in here. There we go. That looks better. Yeah, so we got Superman Earth 1 next week with Michael Bailey. Super excited. Can't wait. So, yeah, check that out next week. That's on the binge. Again, every Tuesday we do a live stream, and we have sub-series. Next week's not really a sub-series. This is us talking comics. I'm trying to, bring on many different people as I can. Super excited. So, yeah, super awesome. Excited for all that. And I've got some comments here. I'll see.
Thwip that like button.
Ooh, I like Thwip. Dude, Thwip is pretty. That's a pretty sweet name. That's pretty good. I like that. Yeah, I like that. Andrew, I like you. You know that already. You already knew that. So anyway, yes. So today, eventually, I keep saying I wish Chris was here, but he's not. Oh well. So today we're going to be talking about the Batman. We're going to celebrate the Batman being on HBO Max because if you haven't seen the Batman, now you can on the HBO Max as free of charge. It's not really free. You pay a monthly fee for it. So whatever. I digress. We're going to talk about that movie a little bit because I love that movie. For people who don't know, I will gush about that movie any chance I can. But I want to talk about the comic book influences of the movie, and because there's a couple different things why I want to talk about that. But I'll wait to hold off on that here in a minute. But we're going to talk about first a little appetizer before we get into the Batman. We're going to be talking about the Batman creative teams. For the new monthly titles, and if you guys don't know, Batman still has monthly comics come out on a regular basis in a mainstream continuity. At least I think it's still a mainstream continuity. And they recently have kind of upped their game because what are you guys taking on Joshua Williams? I know he's kind of a more of an up and coming name, kind of making his name out there for DC. Has that Flash run that people really liked. Are people liking the new Batman stuff he's been doing at all? What are you guys reading it at all?
I hate to be the guy that to praise one thing has to put down another.
That's fair.
But I feel like when when he got on the title, following the Tynan run, it was just like such a relief to a lot of people. And I'm one of those people that I felt like, I remember 118, I think was his first issue on the title. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is such a breath of fresh air. This is a Batman story. This isn't I'm going to make a new IP and, maybe the CW picks it up as a show and I get to spend my retirement years, in comfort. This is a Batman story. And that was like fantastic. So Williamson's run, I've really enjoyed it. I feel like, time will tell.
True.
If I look back on it and I feel as fond about it, like on its own, as opposed to just like, sliding through the last creative team, but I've enjoyed it. It's not like there's been some really great writers on Batman over the years, right? I don't know if it's like peak of the peak, but it's maybe like A tier. It's not S tier, but it's maybe A tier.
No, Jay. Before I get to you, I already know your opinion of the Tynan stuff. So do I already know what you think about this writer, or are you gonna surprise me on this one too?
I mean, he's a step up, like Garrett said. I got to a point with Tynan's run that I just couldn't do it.
You dropped it.
I
did.
Had to drop it. And I mean, Williamson's arc, which is like 4 issues, actually reviewed it and each of them, and I mean it was good. I mean it kind of petered out toward the end.
Okay.
A lot of it was because it had to do some housekeeping for that Shadows of the Bat arc in Detective, which had one of the funniest like page turns I've ever read, because like on one page you've got Oracle saying, Batman, get back to Gotham now. There's an emergency at Arkham Tower. And then you turn the page and it says, after Arkham Tower. So
I know. I was like, did I miss an issue? Is there like a tie-in?
That's
like
funny.
A special one-off that I didn't read?
That's called decompression storytelling, compression. No, compression story. Yeah, compression story. Excuse me.
But then it set up more Ghostmaker, who I despise.
I like the name.
Hunter.
Awesome.
I'm sorry, Pete, but I can't do Clown Hunter either. But just couldn't stand those two characters like at all. Like Garrett said, just felt like an IP farm at a certain point. And then the Shadow War setup, which I haven't been reading that just because I'm just kind of exhausted on crossovers and stuff. But I mean, Williamson's arc, I love Batman Incorporated. I'm like in a minority there, but I loved just that whole like everything that Morrison built up to over that entire run, which I mean I love the entire thing, including Final Crisis, which again
we're covering that soon, by the way. We are covering Jay. Just know that. So if you guys want in on that, let me know. We're planning that in the future. So
but I mean I just love the idea of Bruce is like the Batman, like the international Batman. Dick and Damian were the Batman and Robin of Gotham, and it seemed like it had a really interesting status quo change. And then the New 52 happened and it got wiped away. But you got my boy El Gaucho and Knight and Man of Bats and everything. It was fun. Like Garrett said, it felt like a Batman story. It wasn't trying to reinvent the wheel, wasn't trying to be the definitive anything. It just felt like a good, entertaining story. So I enjoyed that. I enjoyed
I'll say this, not to like, because they're Tynan. I always feel like when I talk about this, I've been on a couple shows and have shared my thoughts on Tynan's run. Like, oh, Garrett hates Tynan. I'm like, no, man, like Tynan's written some good stuff. There's some stuff that I think is like his detective run I really enjoyed, right?
Right.
And when he and Snyder were on Justice League and he was kind of helping Snyder along with Justice League for a while, like there are some issues that he did a really good job with. And there's some issues that
first Batman Ninja Turtles crossover, that was awesome.
Awesome. And the first, I don't know if I can say the first half, his run on Batman started stronger than where it went. I'll say that.
All right. So really quickly, I haven't read all of Tynion's run, but I loved his Detective Comics, like Gotham Knights thing. I love that. I binged that. I read Joker War. I liked Joker War, and I just stopped. I stopped reading after that. Not because I thought it was terrible. I just life gets crazy. all that being said, I know a lot of you guys have not liked, where that's went. I know King was very much the same way as far as people were very hitting, like, is very much down the middle. People either loved him or hated him. I've read for a good chunk of that at the very beginning. I liked that, but didn't compel me to keep reading. So I say all that to say that all that. I thought Joshua Williams was going to be on for a while.
Yeah.
Well, that got kind of debunked, and that then we've got now Chip Zdarsky. And tell me, what's the artist on this one?
Jorge Jimenez.
It's Jimenez still,
He's
which is
on.
great.
Yeah,
because Jimenez is fantastic. I was just always like, oh man, I love Jimenez. And again, he was on Justice League during that run when they're doing, kind of everything that went to death metal. I'm like, this guy is so good. I would love to see him on Batman. He went on Batman. I'm like, oh, I don't love the run that he's on. I don't know if it was great pairing with the writer. So this, I'm hyped that he's going to still be on the title.
Cool. Yeah.
I just hope he doesn't get to design anything because I'm not a
Dang,
fan of his
dang. Man,
I say the same thing with Jim Lee sometimes too, man.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's just it. It's like he's a great artist. I don't think he's a great designer. Like when he drew like just like Superman.
Dude, Cyclops, homie. That's all I gotta say. 90 Cyclops.
Yeah,
that's all Jim Lee.
But Jimenez, when he was drawing like Super Sons and Superman, he was on there for a little bit. That looked amazing. But then, just some of his original designs, either for updates to existing characters or again the kind of IP characters, just I'm not a fan of.
I got you. So what's interesting about Chip Zdarsky is he's obviously one of the bigger names in comics right now, and I like him as a writer. I think I've read his Spider-Man. I've read his Daredevil. I've read some Invaders comics, and it's weird because he has this tendency to just he's a good writer. I will make that very clear, but he just kind of meanders a lot. I feel just in general, and it's like he can't get to the point fast enough. I feel like he's got great ideas, and he writes the characters' voices are all unique enough that I don't feel like one's what I mean. It's not like the same thing over and over again. So I definitely feel like I'm in the minority. I'm a little more critical of his Daredevil than other people. I like his Daredevil a lot, but I also feel like it again meanders a lot too. Where I'm like, dude, get to the point. And it took like 6-7 issues to get to like the Kingpin stuff eventually, where the Devil's Reign or precursor to Devil's Reign, or whatever. But that being said, he wrote an amazing story in that Urban Legends that my boy Pete, I think Pete and Ryan Lauer told me to go check out. So yeah, I loved. I'm not sure if you guys read that yet, but his Red Hood Urban Legends story was incredible. And
I read it. I've heard great things about it. I think probably from Peter and Lauer as well, actually.
Dude,
they talked about it on one of their monthly wrap-up shows.
They did.
Highlights.
Yeah, one of the highlights. It was phenomenal, and I thought he did a great voice for Batman, a great voice for Red Hood. I think he should be doing a Red Hood mini or something like that. That to me would be even more fascinating. But yeah, I thought it was great, and when he was announced, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. It's interesting. Batman and Daredevil, he's not leaving Daredevil. He's still doing it. So he's still doing he'll be doing Batman and Daredevil at the same time. Very interesting. I know, obviously, Frank Miller, I want to say he did Batman and Daredevil like weirdly, kind of almost the same time, but I don't remember how accurate that is. But
if there was an overlap, I mean, it was it was in the same general publishing schedule, I would say.
Yeah, right. But it's gonna be interesting. I think that was a smart move by them, to be honest. I think Zdarsky's he's a good writer. I know he did some black and white issues, I think, with Batman, which I haven't read yet, but I will be checking those out. So I'm actually going to be picking up Batman and Detective monthly for the first time in a long time, since probably the whatever that reboot was, Secret, whatever the one from God, but no, it's the one that Rebirth.
Convergence, Paul?
Rebirth. No, not Conversion. No, Rebirth. Yeah, it's Rebirth. That's what I'll be doing. So I picked up that Detective and Batman, Tinian and King's Batman, and I really enjoyed the flow of those two. So I'm picking them up because the other person. Oh, Jay, I want Zdarsky. Go ahead. I guess.
Oh no, I everything I've read of Zdarsky's, even if it's like I read some of his creator-owned stuff, like Stillwater, which was good. I just kind of was, kind of pulling back on a lot of stuff and everything, so I wasn't as invested as I needed to be to keep reading it, but it was good.
Yeah,
And I mean, I love his Daredevil work. Like you said, great get for the Batman title. Um, Especially, it's not really a title that's necessarily been in flux, I would say,
yeah, I agree.
but it has had some very polarizing
Mm,
Right.
creative teams.
yeah,
So I think Zdarsky is a very, very good writer to like center everything, just
yeah,
because he's what I mean, I think as a joke, he's like the punching bag for like all the creators. They just like to, like take the piss out of him just for fun. Cause like, I mean, he does like the same kind of thing, like calls himself
yeah,
like the worst and everything. So, I mean, there's just, funny, back and forth. But I mean, as a writer, he is legitimately
yeah,
respected. So I think that's great. Jimenez, I mean, like I said, he's a great artist. He brought up something that I didn't even realize, but he said the other day he was posting like some work in progress pages or something, said this is going to be the first time he draws Bruce Wayne, like not just Batman. And I tried to think back and I was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think Bruce was ever
can't
out of
believe it.
costume in any of that, because in Justice League he wouldn't have been out of
Nope.
costume much. And I can't think of in Tynan's run where he
all
would
right,
do it. So
cool,
hopefully they get that good balance
gotcha.
of, Bruce is as integral as the Batman persona. So
Yeah,
hopefully there's some good balance there. And Tim Drake's going to be the Robin in it. So hopefully he gets something to do for the first time in, a
many years.
decade. And
Well, I mean, Gotham Knights. You can thank Gotham Knights for that, right? So, I mean, to be honest, I mean that's kind of what I think why he's in there.
yeah, so
So,
I'm definitely looking forward to the end. I mean, like you said, I'll be picking up the Batman title regularly again.
yeah,
Right.
Garrett, really quick on your thoughts on Zdarsky.
No, I'm hyped. And I hope he's around for a while, because I think,
Yeah,
while this isn't, like you said, it's not necessarily in flux. We've had these long runs with writers who have really got to do some interesting things. Like, Snyder did a ton of interesting stuff in the New 52, and it kind of went in some different directions. And you get King, and I happen to really enjoy King until I stopped enjoying it so much, because he just kind of kept, I'm like, oh, you're doing the King thing again, which is to be expected. But I've really enjoyed Batman Catwoman. And I think I'm like, oh, a lot of
mhm,
this is really Tom King. He's pulling all the tricks out of the hat, right? Like,
yeah,
the
yeah,
narrative device is Christmas carols. So this is the
sure,
whole thing. I'm like, it's great in a series like that. But then, you had some turn. Tynan was around for a while. Williamson. I'd like to see, what Zdarsky can do with a longer run, because what I think he's good at, what he's shown he's good at, is what a lot of writers cannot do well on Batman, where you have a pretty wide cast of characters that can show up, and everybody ends up being a different version of Bruce.
yeah,
Like, Bruce is Bruce, and then there's Dick, who's like happier Bruce, and then there's
Yeah.
Damian, who's like young, mean Bruce, and then there, what I mean,
that's a
like,
good point. Yeah,
everybody
that's a good
just
And
point.
ends
who
being
will
Yeah,
eventually become
shades.
Bruce. Yeah.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And so, like, you start to lose some of the character identity, and the voices get muddy. And Zdarsky, doesn't have that issue for the most
Right.
part. It could be a huge benefit.
Yeah. So, really quickly before we move on, I we'll do Ram V next here. We'll do really quick, kind of real quick. But Zdarsky, the one thing I think is weird, and I'm gonna get a lot of crap for this, is I saw him talking. Someone he was on like a YouTube thing, and they asked him, how do you become a better writer, like for a comic book writer, and maybe I'm misremembering, because I swear he had, and maybe I thought he said this about writer, but I'm pretty sure he said about comic book writer, and I took umbrage on this one, but he said you just need to read anything, just read in general, and I'm like. No, like you need to study comic books. You need to study, how to, I understood, maybe as you, obviously the more you read, the more well versed you are, and the better, better vocabulary. But I'll be honest, if you're focused on dialogue and as a writer in comic books, and getting captions done, you're in the wrong medium, homie. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, he's a great writer.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, but like when he said that, I'm like, no, and like I'll be honest, like it kind of explains a little bit of his meandering. I feel like I'm just like you just want to. This is not a novel. This is not comics are not novels, guys. I hate to break it to you. I know some people like Kevin Smith in the early days would love just dialogue, like, yeah, which is great. But I get it. Zdarsky's a phenomenal writer. I'll never reach his potential ever. But I thought I was like, no, you're wrong. You're wrong. Sorry.
It's because the structure is all different, right? Like
Yeah.
there's something for it doesn't have to be formulaic by any means, but understanding where your page turns are, understanding, how you translate and think about panel movement and everything else. Like it's a different skill set than just like
and
go read a novel.
And for me, like as a writer and I'm trying to get into comic books and things like that, like or just not even get into comics, just create comic books and put them out. That's all I care about doing. But like it's to me, I take a backseat. Like the art has to be the showcase. I thought about me, So anyway, that's just kind of a little interesting thing I thought about him. But really quickly, the one I'm almost equally, if not maybe a little bit more, was Ram V Ram V here. And I have a little bit of a history with Ram V because I discovered his graphic novel, These Savage Shores, which is a vault release. And guys, I'm telling you, if you haven't read that comic book, we're gonna recover it on the binge at some point. It is phenomenal. The art is great. I forgot the artist. I'm terrible with names. Those who know me know I'm terrible with names. But Ram V that was the first time I discovered him. I'm like, man, this guy's really good. And then all of a sudden I've heard, oh, he's doing Swamp Thing, and I read a little bit of Swamp Thing. I liked it. I haven't finished it, but I need to. But he's a great writer, phenomenal writer, and him doing Batman is perfect. I think this to me is what I think could be maybe even better than Zdarsky, because I think aesthetically Ram V kind of fits that Batman idea a little bit. Quickly, your thoughts on Ram V. Gary, I'll go to you first.
I was just as we were good, you kind of gave us a little heads up when we were talking about it. I was trying to think about what I've read of his stuff, and I don't know that I've really spent a lot of time with his writing, but looking at in kind of what you just mentioned too, the titles that he's been on and the work that he's done, and knowing where they're going with Detective is this. I forget how they described it, like an operatic.
Yeah, it's like a gothic opera.
Yeah, which is really weird to me. But go ahead.
It's like everything that I'm seeing that people are saying they like of his feels like this is really, sort of like a match made in, I don't know if it'd be heaven or hell with this, the subject matter, because it seems like it's going to be like, wow, almost, almost more of this like fairy tale esque. I don't quite know with what direction they're going to go into it, but it reminds me of like not fairy tales we think of, but like old school Grimm's brother.
Right.
Like dark, something's kind of menacing and like 1800s sublime literature, Frankenstein stuff. Like that's super intriguing to me. It feels like I need to do some work and go back and read his stuff to sort of get geared
These
up for
Savage
this.
Shores. Read that because
These
that's
Savage Shores. All right.
Yeah,
I'm ready to know.
It's a phenomenal comic book. The art is fantastic. It's different. It really showcases his ability to tell a unique story. And he's a really creative mindset. Again, his Swamp Thing I've only read 2 issues of. I liked it a lot. I'll probably read it when it goes on. I go on DC Universe here or whatever it is now called, and I'll read that. But yeah, go read at least that. These Savage Shores. We'll review it. It's phenomenal. Jay, what's your take on Ram V?
Ram V, I think is, like you said, Paul, kind of even more exciting than Zdarsky, because Zdarsky, you kind of know what you're getting, and Ram V, everything I've read of him, I've liked. But he's kind of sneakily become one of the best writers in the business.
Absolutely.
Like he hasn't enough. He hasn't had like that one like
breakout.
Breakout, like something to make his name yet. So he's like one of those guys that just needs like that one, like we're gonna talk about later, like when the Planet of the Apes movies came out, I heard read a lot of like critics and directors and everything saying that Matt Reeves is almost to the point where he's become like an A-list name. Like these will get him bigger movies like after this. Like they're so good. and everything. So that's how Reeves got the Batman. So Ram V just needs that one thing that will kind of push him over the edge,
Right.
so he'll become a household name.
Mhm.
And Raphael Albuquerque is great, and Dave Stewart is phenomenal colorist and everything. So yeah, I mean, I dropped Batman before Williamson like a year and a half ago. I dropped Detective just a couple months back just because it started to be kind of a drag. But I'm going to be there. I mean, day one for both of these, just because these are incredible creative teams. That would sell me just on the names alone.
It's funny you say he needs that one breakout to put his name in like the upper echelon, like top 5 working like mainstream comic book writers. And let's be real, this could be it.
Oh yeah.
I mean, this very well. It just look by itself. And also, guys, notice this too. Detective Comics. There's no. I love how it says Detective Comics. Almost like it presents. You're taking away the legacy numbering, which again, I think it's interesting. So they're actually titling it. This is interesting. Could be what we're getting in the future as far as legacy numbering and how do we get new readers. And
I mean, I've long said that Detective Comics should be like an anthology book,
anthology series. Yeah,
maybe like what Gotham or Urban Legends is.
Yeah,
but even more so, like
emphasized.
Have just like one main story and then like 5 backups about
Right.
The GCPD and Ragman and
like Marvel Comics Presents was back in the 90s.
Yeah, something like that.
Ghost Rider and Cable Run, and then Wolverine for like 5 issues.
Not even needing like extended arcs with the main story. Just
do
like one longer one.
Develop things. Yeah.
So this is sort of like that. At least what it would look like if it's going to be more of a package. Detective Comics Presents Gotham Nocturne, and then whatever the next one is.
I saw Peter in the comments talk about his Catwoman, so I just looked that up. That's intriguing to me. That might be in order.
Yeah.
So
I meant to check that out too. So as well. So all right. So moving on. I guess Chris will be. I haven't heard from him. I hope he's okay. I'm a little worried about him. He hasn't got back to me. It's not like him. So I'll check in on him in a minute. So we're moving on. Talked about way longer than I anticipated, but it worked out because again Chris isn't here. So we're going to talk about. Yeah, he's here in spirit though. So we're going to talk about the Batman, and I wanted to bring this up to you guys. And the emphasis of the show is talk about the different things that Matt Reeves brought in for this movie. Now, I bring this up because I think it's fascinating that people talk about the success of Marvel, right? Everyone talks about why is Marvel successful, and there's a million different reasons why. And to me, one of the biggest reasons is they're so successful, and it's not like they originated this idea. This is a very common thing that all the superhero movies before have done, but they don't just sit and go, "We need to adapt this one story, right? We need to adapt this and let's add a few different things and we're done," right? They don't do that. They go, "Let's take this, let's take this, and take a little bit of this." And let's put it all together and let's organize. And they start. It's a big stew, and I don't mean that as a smorgasbord, like unorganized thing. The exact opposite. They are very meticulous of what they add, and they try to make it enhance the story. I mean, everyone tries to do that, but I feel Marvel and the writers and the producers specifically have done a great job of showing people or of showing the characters and making them stand out in a way where they are emphasized with these changes, and it never takes away from the bigger story that they're adapting. And they just do a great job of mixing and matching things together and having a more tightly woven continuity, if you will. And I say all that to go to the Batman, because one of the things I after watching Batman like 4 times in the theater, one of the biggest takeaways I've always, to me anyway, and no one really talks about, is all the different influences that Matt talked about pushing together. And it's and we've heard before, like back in like the Nolan, it's heavily influenced by Year One. Like it's like Year One is predominantly what that movie's based upon. Like obviously they've mixed and matched too, just like I talked about with Marvel, but it's primarily Year One. Whereas the Batman is like all kinds of things rolled into one. and we're going to talk about that here a little bit. And at the very end, I'm going to ask Garrett and Jay what the primary two, I think, stories of this, because I think you could you, maybe it's not two, I don't know, but if they if they had to pick two primary ones, which ones are there? So that's what we're going to talk about here. So yeah, I'm curious, what do you guys take on what I'm saying here? Do you guys agree with me, disagree? Jay, go ahead.
No, I definitely think there's lots of influence that you can find in the movie. Like, one of the main influences that I thought was the movie was going to have going into it was actually just a small part, which I mean, I'm sure we'll get it up, but
You talk about it. Bring it up.
yeah, Earth One. There were some. Oh, look at that! There's a graphic.
Told you. I got your back.
There was a lot aesthetically and even a little bit with characterization in it, but it wasn't as much as I thought there was going to be. But you've got some Earth One influence there, with a little bit of like, especially later on in the Earth One story, with the more muddled past of the Wayne family, and even a little bit with Bruce and Alfred's relationship, which I'm very glad the movie didn't go as far as Earth One did, because it was very, very cold through like all three graphic novels, which by the time the third one was written and came out, the movie was already in production. So I doubt that had much influence on it, unless, Matt Reeves and, oh gosh, who was the, whoever co-wrote it with him.
He had a couple different writers, I believe.
Yeah, there was Mattson Tomlinson did like a draft, but I think the final script is Reeves and someone else. But unless they got like a peek at it to be like, hey, do you want to incorporate any of this? It really didn't seem like it would have been, the timing would have lined up. But there is a little bit with Alfred being a little bit more of a military man, and walking around with a cane. So the aesthetics of it, and having a goatee or full beard rather than, a pencil mustache and everything. There was some aesthetic similarities there. And even, Bruce being earlier in his career, but I found that Bruce of the Batman was much more competent than the Bruce of Earth One. So, so this is an influence that I thought was going to pay off more in the movie than it actually did. So there were some others that. Hang on, sorry guys.
Well, and really quick, one of the things I want to add to that is I read this book right before the movie, which I had no idea that it was going to be heavily influenced by it, and I 1000% agree with you. I think this is one of well, I'll save my thing here in a minute. I will say that I was pleasantly surprised of the Alfred of that book, and I can't wait to talk more in detail about the Earth One Batman stories, which I had, full spoiler alert, I freaking loved. Volume 3 is probably my least favorite, but either way, I think Volume 1 and 2 are phenomenal. I think they're great, and I actually really love the new Alfred take, and I think it fits perfectly. And it kind of gets away from, like, honestly, one of the bigger problems, in my opinion, of like a butler. Like, it doesn't really, but it makes more sense in the context of what I think, more so in the Batman with Andy Serkis's character, than even in Earth One. But Earth One establishes that idea that I think Jeff Johns was kind of zoning in on, which I thought was really cool. So, yeah, great point about Earth One. I freaking love Earth One. Garrett, what's your take on, my take on the idea of mix matching all these different Batman storylines, and putting it together, and your thoughts on Earth One as well?
No, I think first of all, what you're saying about the Marvel films really resonated with me, because I always thought like these Marvel movies are successful because they go in and, like you said, instead of adapting specific storylines beat for beat, they sort of start with what's the essence of this character, what are the things that make it memorable, what are the things that have happened to them that make it memorable, what are the characteristics and strengths that they have and possess that really give the character what they are, and then like the trials that have made them who they are, and then find a way to like throw that all in the blender, concentrate it down, and then serve up an engaging, entertaining story for it. So I see that, and I think the comparison is really apt because not very many people will go to the MCU movies to make a point about this, the Batman movie, because they, will say, well, tonally it's so off, and those are, film popcorn films by committee, and this is like an auteur's vision, right?
Yeah.
But in essence, you just sort of swap out that director-driven approach with Feige is in the producer-driven approach. That then say, now let's go out and hire somebody that can shoot a good movie, and this is the vision we want, and we're going to work through it with the script writers and everything else. But that is essentially what Reeves did with the Batman, right? Like,
right.
I actually like, Paul, that you told us to think about 2 when we kind of wrap up, or the 2 main ones, because otherwise my list gets really lengthy really quick.
Exactly. Yeah.
And like having to like,
there's so much that you can,
there's so much in there.
Yeah.
Well, if you have to edit your thoughts down to say what are the 2, one of the ones I landed on, I'm actually surprised. I was kind of sitting here like, oh man, Jay's really throwing me for a curveball here, because at one point I'm like, when I saw the movie for the first time, I'm like, this thing's damn near Earth One, the movie. Like, to me, it just like was screaming Earth One. And Ryan Lauer and I reviewed all 3 volumes of Earth One on his podcast, Batman Book Club,
which I started listening to. By the way, we talked earlier about not finishing podcasts. That's one I need to finish. No, but I've listened to a good chunk of it. It's great. It's great. You guys killed it.
We went on for a while on those.
I love it.
And I was sitting there. I'm like, okay. In some of these, Jay, I think you can kind of like, well, that was a thing that happened thematically. It's a little bit different, but picking moments in time, a Batman that has gadgets that malfunction on him and lead him to get injured. You see that in the very first volume of Earth One. He shoots, he's, launching himself off the rooftop and lands short. He's got his grapnel gun that misfires and kind of like, the spool on it goes in the wrong direction. But for me, a lot of it was, I was struggling to think of if I had seen outside of Earth One, Martha Arkham, the Arkham and Waynes as the founders of Gotham, Martha Arkham having struggled with mental health issues in the past and have been, put in an institution, and then the family, not like that kind of being the dirty secret. Along with her, murder suicide of her parents in front of her. I was like, this is straight. I'm like, is John's producing this? Like, and they like, you got a special thanks at the end, but I was almost expecting like executive producer Jeff Johns on this thing. And it's a little bit different, Jay. I'll agree. This Batman was more competent than that Batman, particularly in Volume 1. And throughout the entirety of the Earth One series, we never saw Batman as a good detective. In fact, I think it's in Volume 2 where like Gordon calls him out on it, right? He's like, "You're not very good at this,"
which is cool. Like, which I liked about the book too.
Yeah, it was something different. It was something new. But I saw a lot of Earth One. Obviously, and this isn't unique to the Batman, but in particular. Gary Frank in Earth One, I think really showcased the eyes in Batman. It was a particular choice not to have the lenses. And Pattinson did so much with his eyes, like that felt, I don't know if they're like, hey, and Robert, remember the comic book I gave you? Do the eye thing like Gary Frank drew them. I doubt that's it at all, right? But it felt like a similarity to me. Yeah. And then of course, like a little bit different approach to the Riddler. I'd say Riddler in Earth One, like looks different than maybe we're used to seeing Riddler look. The look of Riddler and the Batman didn't bother me, and he was a little bit more out for personal revenge and a vendetta in Earth One, along with some monies. Then in the Batman, it was more like this, misguided quest for justice.
Yeah. So, question here, guys. Earth One, I think. Yeah, we'll move on from Earth One because I think we all agree Earth One is it's a lot. I'm curious, what is your take on this story? Now, I read this for the Comic Binge here a couple weeks. I actually really enjoyed it more than I was anticipating, to be honest. Do you feel where do you feel this kind of has a major influence? They use a line directly from it at the very end, obviously, but Do you feel like this influences the movie at all? Would you count this as an influence? 0 year. Go ahead, Jay. Go ahead.
I mean, I'd count it. I mean, at least in broad stroke, which is kind of what I was going for with Earth 1 too. Is you
Hmm,
can get some specific stuff out of there that is like a direct lift,
sure.
but there's just as much specific stuff from like Catwoman when in Rome, with a lot of the
Mm,
character stuff and
okay.
Long Halloween or Year One. So I mean, like
Right.
to your point, Paul, it's kind of a potpourri of what can we pull from different comics and put it together and make it work to make this like our take on Batman.
Right.
So it's not just a direct adaptation of one book over the other with it's not like an adaptation of 0 year with a little bit of Earth 1 sprinkled in and then
Hmm.
one little thing from the Long Halloween thrown in there. It's a bunch of different things mixed together. For it's been a while since I've read 0 year, but
It's not
do,
bad. It's
I
not.
do. Yeah, I mean, I like it fine. It's just been I just kind of got through that whole run, and I haven't revisited it since then, just because there's so many other comics to read out there.
Of course.
But I mean, I know that it is a little bit more precedent for the Riddler being a little more brutal because beforehand it would all be just like mind games. It's all I need to prove that I'm the smartest guy in the room,
Yeah.
and there's a little bit of that, especially in the scene at the end in Arkham when he's taunting Bruce Wayne without realizing he's taunting Bruce Wayne to his face.
Right. 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 Right.
He has that attitude of he's the only one we didn't get, but we did it. We got we set out to do what we wanted to do, and we won because that at its core is what the Riddler wants to do, is prove that he's smarter than everybody, and everything. So in 0 year, I remember he was a little. Remember him being a little more physical with his
Yeah.
goals, because he was kind of a if not a serial killer, he was a mass murderer
Yeah.
with what he was doing, which I mean, I didn't like it when I read 0 year. I didn't think that was the best take for the Riddler, but I mean, it's the story they were telling,
Sure.
and it worked
Yeah.
fine. So it's kind of the same thing with the movie. So I mean,
Yeah.
in a broad sense,
Okay.
it kind of they could have pulled some of it from there.
Mhm.
But I mean, I don't. And again, it's been a while since I've read it, so
No.
I might be
Yeah.
forgetting some major stuff. But
Yeah.
I don't see it as like one. It's not one of my 2 books that I
Oh,
picked
fair.
out.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
That you asked us
Okay.
to.
So Garrett, what besides 0 year, Earth 1, and uh, yeah, I'll leave it. Earth 1, 0 year, and we'll throw I'll say Long Halloween now. I was surprised how much Long Halloween influenced it, considering what they did for, what that story did for, I think, the Nolan trilogy. To be quite honest, so what besides those things, what else would you think was a major influence on this movie?
I was surprised, and I've said this on another show recently. I can't remember if it was one I hosted or one I was on.
They all blend together.
I said I was surprised that I hadn't seen more Year One mentioned.
Yeah, I agree
And
with you 1000%, man.
and it's not so much that it's like, hey, take a look at this, and it's Year One all over it, because Batman Begins was a lot of Year One, but The Dark Knight was a lot of the Long Halloween. So you kind of it's not that you're going back to the well. It's just that those things, those 2 storylines really like got to the heart and soul of who the character of Batman is. And if you want to make a movie that's about the Batman, it would make sense that you'd land on those same type of things and find yourself drawn back to the same type of character defining moments that are in there.
Mhm.
But Year One, and because this isn't a year, because it's not a Batman starting out and figuring out his mission to become Batman. The bat's not flying through the window. He's not, father, I can, whatever.
Yeah.
Like he's not doing all the things that happened in Year One, but there's a lot of Year One sort of like spirit in my mind.
Oh, for sure.
When the movie starts to open and we see Bruce walking through the crowds of whatever the Gotham Times Square thing is, right? In year one, he's walking through Old Town, but besides that, and he's walking through Old Town as like the Drifter, right? And he's kind of got the warm and the fake scar.
That's year one, totally.
That's year one, because if you look at the way even the camera is pointed, it's behind, kind of like third person point of view. You've got the buildings in the background. You have the back of Bruce in the foreground. You swap some of the setting out from like Old Town grimy to grimy New York, LED, lights, and it's a bit more crowded and packed on Halloween, but that felt like exactly the same to me. It's Bruce walking through, the general population, sort of in a different disguise other than Batman, identifying where do I need to go. And that's what the narration is too. And the narration is what brings me back to year one, because it's such a, pivotal point of that storytelling, this first person over the top narration that we open the movie with. Now, it doesn't continue on through the entirety of the movie, but for me, it almost felt like it was there, even though it wasn't there.
Yeah.
It sort of sets the sort of palette for what might come after it. You can almost hear Bruce as he's going through, and we know that he's still writing in his journal and everything else. And in year one, even Bruce's interior monologue is written as if it's in his penmanship in a journal. So it was just like, it really spoke to me. And then there's just some like, that looks like year one bits to me.
Yeah.
I mentioned exactly. Bruce, with his, hoodie and the motorcycle jacket with the makeup on from behind, looks just like the Drifter. But so this Selina Kyle, looks like she is, maybe the build is slightly, she's a little bit more alive than the Batman portrayed by Zoe Kravitz. But the dominatrix outfit that she is in, in that scene where
straight from the page,
straight off the page.
Yeah.
To the, shorter than pixie cut, short haircut. And then in year one, it's always seemed like a little, racially ambiguous Selina Kyle.
Yeah.
And Zoe Kravitz, who's a mixed race actress, I doubt they casted her to fit that because of that. But, all that starts to feel very similar. And this felt in some ways like it's not a sequel to year one, but almost in some ways like a spiritual successor to year one would feel like this year two, but not, kind of. Right. That makes sense.
Well, and to be fair, I haven't read this, and before you guys comment, but I've been told they obviously borrow a lot from this. I love Dark Victory. I need to read it. I'm feel as foolish that I haven't read it yet. But from what I understand, the reveal of Catwoman is from this story. So what's fascinating is they took, and this is why I bring the Marvel idea. This is my whole pitch of what I think it's brilliant what Matt Reeves did. And I'm not sure if it was purposeful, but I believe it. He took obviously year one. He's like, okay, I'm gonna take year one Catwoman, and I'm gonna take Dark Victory, put them together, and you get the Batman.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty brilliant. I'm like, man, like that's actually pretty brilliant. Like, oh no, I can only do one adaptation. No, I'm taking, I'm taking all these different things. I'm like, yeah, that's pretty damn smart. And
well, and sorry, Paul. I was just saying, for me, when I read, when I sort of like I'm really gonna get into, going through a stretch of reading back through some trades, particularly in Batman. I'll start in year one, I'll go Long Halloween, and then I'll go right into Dark Victory because they feel like a trilogy in my mind, right?
Right.
All the way to year one, by the way, Catwoman scratching old Falcone's face up, at the end as he's starting to get, he's like going to strangle her out, and she reaches up and scratches him. It doesn't happen the same way in year one, right? But
of course.
It's there. I think like going through and thinking about, we all sort of have this, whether it is in continuity or in canon or not, we all kind of have this like mental briefcase of what the character is to us, and you reach in
Mhm.
there, and for me, you're pulling out these three stories almost as a collected unit. And if Reeves doing that same thing, and and he's like, here's what matters to me around Batman and the kind of
Mhm.
stuff that I want to influence my movie, not to be always a direct lift and shift adaptation, but to sort of like, they're the seasonings I'm going to use in my dish, then that's awesome.
Yeah, and I want to say before we wrap up here, I love how we're all kind of on the same page with this. As far as like, Matt taking so many different things and really making like again the canon. And one thing I want to say, I think one of the things that DC has been trying to do with their canon is make everything counts. It's kind of like Star Wars, right? Like if you guys aren't familiar with Star Wars, and not just you guys, I mean everyone. If you're not familiar with Star Wars and the canonicity, everything is canon. Like the books and the comics, but there are going to be just in any continuity. It's not perfect. There's going to be discrepancies. What's interesting is recently in the Bad Batch arc, or Bad Batch arc, the Bad Batch animated series, they take the canon comic and they take some liberties with it, and they add some things that are not. It's not verbatim one for one, and people are complaining. And I said, no. You understand? The outcome is still the same for the character, right? So Kanan in the comic book, Kanan faces the clones and they kill his master. Spoiler alert. Okay, that's what happens in the comic books. In the Bad Batch, that still happens, but the Bad Batch is there, and like it's same planet, it's same outcome, except it looks a little different and a little bit, but he still leaves, he still runs off on the planet, and then so it pretty much still ends the same way. Now, is it happen verbatim the same way? No. And I think that's what DC's trying to do. So bringing your point of the idea of like Falcone and what does that mean and what's the canon. So I feel like all those things can still be happening. They don't have to turn out the same exact thing. They don't have to all be exactly every detail has to be exactly right. They just have to be in essence like, oh yeah, that happened. Like for instance, another great example is Marvel's sliding timeline, which I think is the perfect time. I think is a perfect thing for this because obviously, not everyone you can't just stay in the same year because time keeps going, right? So the Punisher went from Vietnam to Gulf. You know what I'm saying? Like things like that. There's going to be differences, and you just gotta, the outcome needs to be the same, but the times and how it happens needs to be a little bit different and adjust. So I feel with Batman, it's all in that same kind of context. So you touched on that. I thought that was a good idea. Again, we go on forever, but I want to talk about. We're going to grab your two main influences. And I'm pretty sure I have the covers for them all. So, Jay, I'm going to go with you first. What are your top two main influences on Matt Reeves, the Batman?
So my first influence, and I had to think about this for a little bit because
Why you had to think about it?
well, I was like, do I want to? And after watching it again this afternoon, it kind of cemented that okay, this is the right choice. But it is Batman issues 404 through 407 from Frank Miller, David Mazzucchelli, Richmond Lewis, and Todd Klein. Yes,
Batman. I love how you did that. By the way, you scared me.
Batman Year One. Andrew Custer is that his name in comments over here? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I liked what he said here that it's grimy just like Year One. Reeves tackled that source differently than how Nolan interpreted Year One. So I was like, if Nolan adapted the story of Year One, Reeves adapted the atmosphere.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Like we were talking here with the way that Gotham looks and Bruce going out in street clothes disguises and everything. So there's still some story elements that kind of match up somewhat similar, at least in broad strokes and some general beats and everything. But I mean, the movie never touches on his origin, but it's still there, and you still know what it is. Because it's just such a foundational part of Batman. It doesn't ignore it. It just doesn't explicitly state it. It's kind of like the same thing with, Year One story. It doesn't take anything directly from the overall story, but it's just such a foundational part of the Batman history at this point that it has to influence it, just because
Right.
that is the, even after, Zero Year and
Right.
a bunch of other,
Earth One.
potentially
Even,
reboots. Yeah, I mean, Year One is still the Batman origin story.
It should
Um,
be. It should be.
Mhm.
All right. Two.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry.
And then
Sorry. I mean,
second one, this one was kind of a curveball here, so I'm sorry, but
no, they're good.
it's Batman number 217 from Irv Novick and
Show me.
Dick Giordano and Frank Robbins. You know the cover. It's hang on, it's kind of hard. It's okay, sorry. Anyway, it's Batman telling Alfred to lock up the Batcave and never open it again. And you're not familiar with this? Well, the story is very much
what is it? Tell me. Will you tell me the title? I want to put it in the comments and post it.
It's Batman 217. The title of the story is
One Bullet Too Many.
One Bullet Too Many. Yeah, but kind of like with Year One, that it adapted the atmosphere. I feel like a lot of even unintentional influence came from this, because the crux of the story here is Dick Grayson is going to college. So Bruce feels like he needs to get closer to the city to continue being Batman, just because it's such a big house and everything. Just too many memories, there with, Dick being gone and, just kind of, being melancholy and everything. So he moves his base of operations into a tower in the middle of Gotham City and starts patrolling and, fighting crime from there. It's very, like I said, it's very much a 1969 comic. It's kind of silly and goofy, and the story is nothing at all like the Batman, but like Year One's visual aesthetics reminded me a lot of it. This kind of this status quo change that fed over into like the Denny O'Neil and Steve Englehart and Marshall Rogers and Neil Adams and all that stuff in the 70s that had a more, I think, direct influence maybe on the Batman. This is kind of where it started. This was
like the precursor to that.
Yeah, right. It's like the regime change.
Yeah.
So I felt like this was I had to be a super comic dweeb and try to impress everybody. So I pulled
that's really impressive. I would have gone there. But the Penthouse, and really, if you think about it, is certainly not as scary and brutal as what we get in the Batman.
No.
But this was when the real the tide was changing to bring back Batman to more of a creature of the night that was terrifying and really used fear as an element to in his mission against criminals. And man, I mean, you get that in spades in the Batman, right away from they don't know what shadow I'm in, and just like
which I loved. I watched it yesterday. Yeah, that was amazing. That was such a brilliant choice. Garrett, 2. What's your 2?
Dude, I'm not going to seem nearly as smart or impressive.
Dude, Jay had to slam dunk on us.
I had to sound impressive.
Here, you're like this. You know what he did? He did a corner blitz, man. Weren't expecting it.
I know.
He just corner blitzed us, and I'm like, wait, what?
And he just quarterback, and I'm done.
You got quarterback. Thanks, Jay. Thanks a lot.
I don't have too much to add, right? So like, mine's Year One. Year One is my, and there's so much. Whatever the handle was, I think.
Andrew,
really well said around
Andrew's awesome.
The way it was adapted differently, between Nolan and Reeves. But like there's the thing that stands out for me besides some of the artistic choices and shots that look the same and a young Batman and kind of grimy. That grimy comment was what really I enjoyed a lot. Corruption is such a pivotal aspect of Year One, and we talked about this on the Batman on Film podcast when we talked about one of the episodes we did on the Batman. Was that I don't know that we've ever had a Batman live action movie that's ever been as concerned with the subject of corruption through politicians and the police force, and
1,000%.
That's got Year One written all over it.
Totally.
Actually, Peter made a really, I thought he said, "What about Rises?" But it was
comics,
Gordon that was in Dark Knight Rises. Like, it was Gordon that had the corruption. It was the corruption that the lie of Harvey Dent, was really pivotal to the plot of Rises. But if we're talking about politicians and police officers, it's all year one. And then the other one,
number two.
The other one is Earth One for me. I think
you're right though, man. I think you're on the money.
The aesthetics, even opening with, think about the villains that were chosen. That's between volumes 1 and volumes 2. You're covering the Riddler, you're covering the Penguin. You got to get to volume 3 before you get Catwoman or whatever the heck that was. But
that was a low point. That was a low point. Really. Yeah, that was
take. I thought actually, outside of the costume design, the take to Catwoman was really pretty good. Just like, oh man, you guys went nuts with this design.
Like Gary Frank and Jorge Jimenez should not be designing.
Yeah, guys, just like
design. That was well said. But anyway, continue about Earth One.
Because the elements we talked about already, the aspect of the different relationship with Alfred, we don't know for certain that Bruce didn't get training from anyone else ever in the universe of the Batman, but it was pretty much where he got all his fighting expertise in Earth One. And they had a cool relationship. They have a cool relationship. It's not as antagonistic as in the book. They literally have a fist fight, and Bruce kicks out his prosthetic leg at one point in Earth One. We didn't go there.
We could still.
And having a little bit more of a disaffected Bruce. He's a little bit slicker than Pattinson ever was, but he is not, Mr. Charisma that we think of Bruce Wayne in some aspects. So that, along with the Martha and the Arkham situation, is his father running for mayor. I thought there was just a lot of it without it being a literal translation of the story. You look at the two things together along, and this is where my list can get really long. All the way down, I should mention one thing too. We talked about this on a different show. In volume 2, the Riddler has vans planted around Gotham City with explosives as a part of his plot. Like, they weren't used for the same. They weren't used to cause a flood, but that felt like a direct riff in some ways. So all that stuff kind of comes together, and you put the ingredients in the pot, you cook it on slow, and all the flavors meld together. That's where we are.
And I as we're wrapping up here, I think I'm glad you guys all kind of agree with me that it feels more like not how Marvel or what Marvel does, but how they kind of combine so many different storylines together in different aspects, and they make a great movie. And just cherry picking all these different ideas from the comic books and molded again. Infinity War and Endgame are great examples. That is literally what they did. They took so many different elements of great aspects of the Infinity Gauntlet, Infinity War comics, or not Infinity War, but like other aspects, from the Infinity comic storyline with Jonathan Hickman, and you get pretty much, all these other different things. You get Endgame in this, and it's phenomenal.
Civil War too, right? Like Civil War, I enjoyed a lot, and I never was like, I wasn't like, ticked off that it wasn't, Peter pulling his mask off and doing all the beats.
Yeah, quite.
And like the theme at the end of the movie is lifted, if not verbatim, at least in spirit, from DC: The New Frontier, where Batman tells Superman, I set out to scare criminals, not the innocent. So I need to change up my methods.
I just got the chills, man. I love that part of New Frontier.
Which I was telling Paul off before the stream earlier. It's like the ending of the movie, like the movie was good up until a certain point, but then the finale made me actually love the movie and want to see more of this.
And one thing,
that growth.
Yeah, and as we end here, I want to emphasize a couple things. First, you're absolutely right, Pete. Like, this is why the source material is so important to inform us. And I think Ron Mars had a great tweet that I think was so perfect. He said, the comics are, is a dog wagging the tail, not the tail wagging the dog, or whatever. I'm butchering that, but that's essentially what it is. And he's absolutely right. The comics are. They have to be the sources, and it's just so funny because I said, I responded to Ron Mars saying, quote tweeted it. I said, comic books saved Hollywood. They saved Hollywood, and it just bums me out because
At least the theater chains right now, you know.
well, but no, but like I mean, think about this. Like, what is Netflix and all them trying to do? They're trying to they hired Mark Miller
Yeah.
and trying to get him to pump out IPs and everyone's trying to get IPs created through comic books because it's like, oh, if it seems good and it does and it responds well to people in comic books, it probably means people will like it too in general. Who would have thought? I mean,
dude, that's where I get, and you know what, like I take some crap from some of our buddies around like, oh, is it comic accurate or is it not comic accurate? Like for me, it's not everything has to be comic accurate, but it should be in spirit to the characters because that's why these things have lasted 84 years of Superman. Superman has lasted 84 years because the character that they created, there are some like absolute musts, some inarguable truths to that character.
I
that
would rather have
with
consistency than flat out accuracy because
absolutely
you can adapt something from the page and lose all meaning.
Exactly.
Of what happened.
Or you can pluck a bit of dialogue and put it in the mouth of a character where the rest of the movie doesn't support what was just said, and it's nothing but lip service.
Catwoman. And the opposite of that, though, is taking a more dialogue that wasn't said by that person, but then give it somebody else in a different context and using the source material, like the ending of Zero Year for the ending of the Batman.
Right.
When you have Zoe Kravitz that you're already spoken for, it's perfect. But that's obviously influenced directly from the comic books. It's the verbatim different character, but you're again not consistent with the source material. But it's adapting and using that, and because it's so good, you're like, oh, we gotta use that. It's perfect. So
it's
like true to the
Civil War, Sharon Carter's "You Move" speech, from Cap, but attributing it to Peggy. It's the same kind of thing.
Exactly. It's great. And I wanted to be selfish here and just kind of show some people's comments here. This person, I'm gonna butcher your name, Khalil, I believe. Very, very nice you saying this, and then this made me just like, oh my gosh, like seriously, anything people say nice is like such a huge thing for me. And I always say the same thing. Extremely humbled. I mean it. I don't say it because I don't mean it. I mean it's humbling. Anytime people give you any kind of praise or I don't need praise, but just a nice thing like that, encouragement. It's such a valid thing and a valid and valuable thing that I want people to do more of for everybody.
Costs nothing to be kind, guys.
Yeah, exactly. It takes more to be kind than to be nasty, and things like that I will never take for granted. Thank you so much, Khalil. It honestly means a lot to me. In fact, you watch any episodes of this is great, and the reason I do this is to have fun and to promote comic books. And guys, thank you so much for coming on. Again, Khalil, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on, guys. Jay, promote yourself, sir. Where can people find you at?
Twitter at JAYAWS. It's my name, and there you go.
Yes, Garrett, you're on a lot of different things. Jay, before I go to you, Jay, you need to be on more everything.
Yeah. I've joined the Everyone Loves the Drake crew, so
I heard about that.
I didn't know that. That's
podcast,
great.
Woo! It's great.
Which I'm gonna have people over there.
Yeah, and I'm gonna have Rob, and obviously Ryan's gonna come on too soon. So, but Jay, you need to be on more stuff in general, which I'm gonna have obviously you on a regular basis here with me, as you've already noticed, and I love having you on. Thank you so much for coming on a late night. Garrett, you are on the other hand on a ton of stuff, rightfully so, because you're great. So, where can people find your stuff at? And promote yourself, my friend.
Man, anybody who knows me knows I love talking, and
same here. I love talking too.
You can talk. We can talk on Twitter. I wrote my whole handle there just in case anyone.
In case you didn't know,
it was saved. I was on a show before, and they asked to like, "Hey, do your handle and then what website or whatever podcast you'd like to rep." So when I logged in, it was still on there. So you follow me at Garrett Wado. You can check out my stuff over on BatmanOnFilm.com. I'm not reviewing any comics right now, but I was on Justice League for a long time. Those reviews are up there. I've got movie reviews and animated reviews and a bunch of other stuff. You can listen to the podcast. I host the Batman on Film podcast, so you could check out that feed. You can also get Bill, our editor-in-chief, social hour along there, so we kind of tag team that feed. It's either the BOF pod or his. And otherwise, I make some appearances. I mentioned Ryan Lauer's podcast.
Yeah, great episode.
I make some appearances over there. I know you guys. I think both been on. I know you both have
We
been
both
on. I've listened to both of your episodes.
we're all alumni here at the
Alumni,
book club.
alumni of the library.
I came in
So, yeah.
clutch to stay
Yeah,
for Christmas
you're
episode because he didn't have one planned. And I was like, hey, you want to do this one?
Oh
Yeah,
man, I love
and
flowers.
otherwise, just hit me up. I like to chat. I'm a chatty guy. I'd love
You
to
are a
hang out.
chatty guy, and you're awesome. I meant to have you on for a long time, Garrett. I'm so glad. And obviously,
It's Paul. You know what? The pleasure is all mine. And I'll because you said you appreciate people saying nice things. Before I started podcasting, before I started writing reviews, before I started doing any of this fun, nerdy stuff online, I listened to you guys on Modern Myth Media, and it was my favorite podcast. I couldn't wait for new episodes to come out. I listened to each and every single one, and I love the way you guys talked about the stuff that I loved, and I wasn't hearing anyone else talk about it that way. So, I have appreciated the work you've done for a very long time. It's great to be on the show.
Man, that honestly means a lot, and you're doing great. I just love the community that I'm trying. It's already built, but I'm trying to expand it to more people and get more people involved because I love like we're all kind of in the similar backgrounds a little bit, and I think we both put an emphasis on a fellowship of whatever you want, right? A community, of people you can depend on, for friends and our family outside of your own family. And I think that's one thing I want to create with comic books is that's what's created for me. And I think that I want to share that and want to give other people that as back as well because it's given so much to me, and I want to give back to those and promote the medium that I love. That I think is so is so undeservedly like no one talks about, and I just want this medium to grow. You guys are awesome. Garrett, obviously, I'm going to have you on again, obviously.
Yeah,
and Jay, obviously, we'll get all you guys. We'll get you all. I honestly am very blessed. That I can say that to all these different people that I have such a great time. So, anyway, yes, follow the Comic Binge, subscribe to the Comic Binge, check us out there. Everyone, thank you so much who's already subscribed, listened. Next week, Michael Bailey, Superman Earth 1. I'm excited. Hopefully, I hope Chris is okay. I haven't heard back from him. Maybe he fell asleep. I'm leaning on he fell asleep. But
for you.
I got 3 hours sleep last night. Just to tell you that. So it's crazy. Anyway, thank you all for coming. Chris isn't here, so I'm going to say it. Read more comics. Bye, y'all. Thanks.